Signal Sciences secures the most important web applications, APIs, and microservices of the world's leading companies, protecting over 7,500 applications and 150 billion production requests per week. Signal Sciences Next-Gen WAF and RASP help companies increase security and maintain site reliability without sacrificing velocity, all at the lowest total cost of ownership. Signal Sciences' patented technology protects any application against any attack, with integrations into any DevOps toolchain. Signal Sciences. Demand more from your WAF. Learn more at signalsciences.com/PSW. Introducing the new DigiCert. As the leading provider of high-assurance SSL, TLS, and PKI certificates, DigiCert is all about improving security across the web and IoT. DigiCert is committed to helping customers and partners successfully deploy identity, authentication, and encryption solutions. They'll even help you figure out which certificate you need to secure your web domains, apps, devices, and more. Check out the Cert Wizard tool under the SSL tab on digicert.com. Welcome back, everyone, to Paul's Security Weekly, quick wardrobe change, and wanted to tell you about DerbyCon. DerbyCon's holding its first ever mental health and wellness workshop to support their efforts. Please go to derbycon.com/wellness. Also, in DerbyCon announcements, Security Weekly will be there. You can find the illustrious, not Kevin, working our booth the entire time in the vendor area. Kevin will be wearing his Depends, working the booth the entire time. Come bring him food and beverage and a bucket, because that's his job. And thank you, Kevin, for volunteering.
And afterwards, he's driving to NASA.
That's right.
That's right. Not only will he have Depends, he's going to have a bag on his leg as well.
That's it.
Going to be well equipped.
You're a trooper, Kevin. You can go to securityweekly.com/DerbyCon 2018. There is a site there. It's not quite done. We're almost at MVP. But securityweekly.com/DerbyCon 2018 will list out all of the activities.
Nice.
If you work for a vendor, if you're giving a talk, if you've done a really cool project for the community and given it away for free, you can find ways on that website, tells you how to do it, to get in touch with us so that you can do an interview or some type of briefing with us at DerbyCon.
Nice, nice. So the page isn't quite finished, but it's just right on the edge.
It's right on the cusp, right on the edge of being completed.
Excellent.
Yes.
Hey, we'd be remiss.
Then it'll be officially released.
We'd be remiss if we didn't mention Wild West Hackin' Fest. I'm just saying.
We would be remiss.
We just did.
Oh, we just did.
Wow. Wow. Well, Joff, I'll be there. I know you'll be there.
You're going to be there?
Is it wildwesthackinfest.com?
It is wildwesthackinfest.com. That's no G on the hacking.
No G.
And Wild West Hackin' Fest is going to be held in late October in Deadwood, South Dakota. The actual con is Thursday and Friday, October 25th and 26th. And it is going to be a lot of fun. So you should come.
I'll be there too, Joff and Larry.
Woohoo.
We'll have a party. And it's all down in the town. None of this trekking a mile up the hill to that other place. Everything's going to be
right. The location has been moved.
The venue
has
changed.
Unless, of course, you were not able to get a hotel room at the venue and are sleeping up the hill.
Well, it could be, but the hotel is the Grand Hotel for Wild West Hackin' Fest 18. We're really excited, right? Black Hills started this conference last year, and even in the space of a year, that it started to grow, and I'm just really excited. It's going to be a lot of fun.
wildwesthackinfest.com. Mr. John Moran is here with us. John's the senior product manager at DFLabs, and what he will be talking about today is actually a free open source tool I was telling you about earlier. So you don't have to go find some other free software. John's going to talk about no-script automation. John, welcome.
Hey, thanks. Glad to be here. It's this is I'm not sure how I feel about being out of the studio. I like being in the studio, but
yeah, this is your first remote appearance. Is this your first time on Paul's Security Weekly?
It is.
Yes.
Yeah, first time. Yeah, I've done Enterprise Security Weekly, but I haven't done PSW. So
yeah, and now, John, when we first met, you were telling me about this open source project. You were hoping to kind of release it through your employer, DFLabs, who is a sponsor. I think of Enterprise Security Weekly. I'm not sure about this. I get confused. You're a sponsor of our network in some capacity. For those that are interested, if you want to check out Enterprise Security Weekly, John did an awesome demonstration about how to use security automation an orchestration tool or orchestration and automation tool, and some really good use cases. If you're into that kind of thing and want to know more, check out that segment on Enterprise Security Weekly. But John, you're here today to talk about a free open source project that you're releasing alongside of your employer, correct?
Yeah, it was something we actually released it at Black Hat. It's something. So right now I'm working in product management, so I've kind of gotten out of the hands-on a little bit. But prior to coming to DFLabs, I was doing incident response consulting, and actually prior to that, I was doing IR and forensics and law enforcement. And so it was kind of one of those tools that started as a homegrown thing to kind of address some of my own problems, some of the issues I was having doing live response, and then I thought, well, I can slap a few bells and whistles on here, and maybe somebody else will find it useful. So I was fortunate enough that DFLabs let me spend a little bit of time doing that, and so we were able to release it at Black Hat, did an Arsenal talk there, and we're actually going to be down at the SANS Threat Hunting and IR Summit next week, where I'm going to do a talk more centered around live forensics and incident response, but we'll be talking about the tool there as well. So if anybody's going to be down there in New Orleans next week, come check it out.
What problem or challenge were you encountering that prompted you to write this tool?
So, when we do live forensics, I think a lot of other people in the industry tend to rely on a bunch of different little tools, right? I have yet to find one tool that is going to go out and get all of the live artifacts that we want and do it really well, right? You end up with, a little 10K tool that goes and gets your network connections, and another tool that's going to go out and get your memory, another one that gets processes, file handles, all that stuff. And by the time you're done and you've got your set of tools, you end up with 30, 40, 50 different little executables that you've got to run. And so how do you do that kind of securely and in a repeatable, documented way? So what most people, including myself, did was start scripting it. So you write a batch file. Now you've got a batch file that contains 40, 50 different lines of code to run all of these different executables, and then you've got to deal with how do you pipe the output of those, and then kind of compounded on that. Now you've got some tools that maybe only run on Windows XP systems or Windows 7 systems or 64 or 32-bit systems. And so then you try to start working that into your batch file, and it gets even bigger, and now you want to hash your output, and it gets even bigger. And no lie, when the last batch file I was using was I think almost 1,700 lines of code. It was I prettied it up a little bit, so it had some nice output.
Was that a Windows batch file or a Linux or Unix bash script?
No, a batch.
Okay.
For Windows.
Yep. Gotcha.
This is for doing Windows IR. Mm-hmm. So it was like 1,700 lines of code, and then you want to add a new tool, and it's not just a matter of finding one line. It's it can be quite a hassle. So I was trying to figure out a better way to do that, without having to have these gigantic batch files that you have to go in and edit every time you want to add a new tool. So I created kind of a little executable wrapper that will go out and try to do some of that stuff automatically for you and run all those tools without you having to script all of it. Hence the no script automation tool.
Nice.
I heard T-Pain was an executable wrapper. Wait.
Oh.
Sorry.
Just wrong.
Never mind.
So when you wrote the executable wrapper, John, did you write it in in C# or what was the executable written in?
It's actually written in VB.NET,
okay.
And don't hate on that. That was one of those things that I taught myself to write in years and years ago. Actually, how I got started in the industry. So I've kind of stuck with it. It's for small projects like this, it gets me by. So
yeah,
you should have done it in PHP.
Well, I mean, you could do it in Python, and you could compile it into an executable field. I mean, there's a million things, but that's what John chose, so that's cool.
Well, technically, you can't compile it into an executable, but you could use the Nuitka project, which is the latest greatest in CPython, which will attempt to produce as close to a compiled version as possible. Just saying, I teach the Python class.
Thank you, Josh.
CPython? Sounds dirty.
CPython. It does sound dirty. So, yeah, most of the compiled Python, quote unquote, is actually packaging up a Python interpreter with the dependencies and delivering it.
Is that how they do it on Linux, Joff?
Well, I don't know, actually, to be honest. I have not used the Freeze or the Pi2xe stuff on the Linux side of the house.
Gotcha.
Because, honestly, you usually don't need to, right? There's a Python interpreter always there.
Sure. But John did not choose Python, and John's going to tell us a little more about what you did end up with when you were done.
Yes, he is. I'm going to shut up now. Bye-bye.
No, you're good. No, that's actually something, I think at some point I'd like to actually do this for Linux as well, because I think you run into the same kind of issues. But primarily, at least in what I was doing, I was running into mostly Windows hosts that I was doing live response on. So, but maybe next year when I get some more free time, I'll crank out a Python version for Linux too.
Nice.
All right, so let me go ahead and share out my screen here, and we'll give a quick walkthrough.
John, while you're doing that, what kinds of tools are wrapped inside of your script?
So the great thing about it is it's not tool dependent. You can use whatever you want. The idea is that you pick your tools, and this will just allow you to run them, repeatably and securely, and kind of document everything for you and all that. So, I have out on the website, there's a link on our website that sends you over to our GitHub page, DFLabs.com/nat, N-A-T. And I have a list of tools out there that are kind of the ones that I've collected over the years, and different links to go get them from their original source. But, whatever you have in your arsenal, maybe you can even run scripts. So if you've got some kind of, homegrown scripts that you want to run, you can still do that. The idea is that this just kind of creates a wrapper around them to take care of executing them all with the correct arguments, hashing your outputs, and making those OS and architecture decisions for you. So
awesome.
So you should be able to see my screen. Okay, so this is all you need to run NAT right here. We've got the NAT executable. We've got a file called default.ini, and we've got a tools folder. So the idea is that all of your tools that you're going to want to execute are going to go in this tools folder. Now, I've split mine out into multiple subfolders. You don't have to do that, but we saw that default.ini folder, you can actually create multiple .ini folders and run different subsets of these folders, right? So if I wanted to only run maybe the OS and the network tools, I could have another .ini file that just said, hey, go out and run those. So I kind of recommend splitting up your tools into these subfolders just to kind of give you some options, but it's not a requirement. So what we do is we just place whatever tools we want to run within those subfolders, right? So we can see here I've got TCP vcon as one of the tools that I want to run for networking. I've limited my tool set quite a bit here so we can kind of speed through the execution portion of the demo. Obviously, I'd have more than one network tool, but and you'll notice one thing I've done here is I've renamed the tool to append NAT underscore and then the name of the tool. That's not a requirement, but it's something I do as kind of a best practice where you are running stuff on a live host. There's other ways to tell what artifacts you've created versus ones that may have already been on the system, but it's just kind of a good best practice, right? It makes it easy to just, that's something I ran just based on the file name. So when we run that by default, it's going to go into all of the folders that we specify in that ini file and execute any of the tools that are in there. You notice I've got a couple of subfolders in here as well, one named x64 and another is named 6.7 to -10.0. That's how we specify any CPU architecture dependent tools or OS dependent tools. So if we have tools that we only want to run on a 64-bit system, we just create an x64 folder and we put them in there. And they'll only run if NAT detects it's running on a 64-bit system. Same thing with the OS versions, right? 6.7 to 10 is only going to run on 6.7 to Windows version 10. You can see we've got additional tools in there. Now you can also, as you saw in the x64 folder, nest those. So I can have this x64 folder, and then I can have a 10.0, or I could have another 6.7 to 10 folder in there. So then it will only run on 64-bit systems that are version 6.7 to 10. So that's kind of an easy way to specify what tools you want to run on what architectures and OSs, whereas in a batch file, it can be kind of a hassle. The other thing you'll notice in here is this .cmd file. So obviously there's going to be times, probably a lot of times, where you want to specify some arguments to go along with that particular tool, right? Whether it's piping output or specifying a particular flag. And the way you do that is to create just a text file, and it's named exactly the same as the executable, just with a .cmd extension at the end. So if we look at this, we'll see in this case, it's just accepting the EULA, so you don't get that EULA pop-up. But that's how you specify command line arguments for your tools. Now you can specify multiple command line arguments for your tools. So if you wanted to run TCP/vcon 2 or 3 times with 2 or 3 different arguments, you just put one on each line, and that will execute it once for each line of command line arguments.
And John, what was the name of the tool you're running? TCP what?
TCP/vcon. It basically it's a command line tool that will just grab network connections. Okay. And we'll see the output of that in a little bit. That is one of the tools that's on my recommended list. For those of you who go out to the website, take a look.
So it's like a fancy netstat?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, basically. It's like a portable netstat. I try to rely on tools that don't rely on any built-in Windows components, right? Because
sure,
you're doing live forensics. You don't want to potentially run something that may be compromised.
Right. Yeah.
So TCP/vcon.
Netstat is Trojans. You have to bring all your own tools. Yeah, it's coming back to you now.
Yeah, and there's still, you can still run into issues, but at least you limit the issues you might run into if you're running self-contained tools. So, yeah, it's a self-contained netstat.
Awesome.
So that's all you need to do. That's how you organize your tools. Now you can see we've got obviously multiple folders here. We've got some OS tools that we're going to run. We've got some process tools, just a couple. And then some user tools. You can see in here there's even a batch file in here, so we can also use it to execute batch files. Basically any executable file format will run through NAT. So once we have all those folders set up, we just configure our default.ini with the names of the folders we wanted to run. So in this case, by default, it's going to run the executables in all 4 folders. Now, like I said, if we wanted to, we could just maybe run OS and process tools, and we could save that as maybe process.ini, and that we could call that from the command line if we wanted to specify that particular ini file. And that's it. That's all there is to the configuration. So if we actually jump over into a command prompt here, and we run it, we'll see we're going to get a security warning. Basically, what that's telling us is that we haven't created an integrity file. Now, one of the other issues that you can run into with running batch files and unknown executables is very easy for somebody to come in and modify an executable, take away an executable, even change your batch file or drop a malicious executable in there. So what you can do with NAT is actually create, we call it an integrity file, and it's going to go through and it's going to hash all of your executables, all of your command line arguments, and kind of create a gold standard or a baseline of tools, if you will. So the way we do that is run it with the -C. And it's going to go through. It's hashed all of our tools. We can see for things like the CMD files and the batch files. It's actually going to show us the text output of that. So we can look through and we can say, are these all trusted tools? Are we good? Is this our gold standard of tools? And if so, we say yes, and it's going to ask us for a password. We enter that password. Now it's created an integrity file, and that's going to be stored with the NAT executable on that drive. Now the only way that you can run the tool without getting a security warning now is to enter that password, and before it actually successfully executes, it's going to go back and check that integrity file to make sure all of the tools are the ones you've entered. So now if we run it, it's going to ask for a password. enter the incorrect password, it's just not going to execute for us. Let me go ahead and let's actually edit a batch file real quick so we can see what it looks like when it doesn't match. So right now...
Sorry, John, where are the good hashes stored? And are they compared against the ones you're running on the system?
Yeah, so the good hashes are stored in that integrity check file. That's actually located right with our NAT executable. So you see we've got another file here called integrity.ck. Now this is all encrypted. So we'll see some plain text up at the top, and then it's all encrypted with our password that we entered, so nobody can get in and mess around with it or anything like that. So what I've done here is just change the text of this batch file, right? So now when we go to run NAT, it's going to see that that batch file isn't the same. The hash isn't going to be the same, and the text won't be the same either. So we'll go ahead and run NAT, and we'll enter the correct password this time. But we get another security warning. It says the executables or commands don't match the integrity file. So it's detected that this particular batch file has been modified or is somehow different, and it tells us what the content is in this case because it's a text file. So it's going to ask, do you want to continue to run or not, or do you want to view the integrity file contents so you can actually do a kind of a side-by-side comparison? Now it's not necessarily bad when they don't match, and a lot of tools like the sysinternals tools will modify a config file every time they run, right? So it's not always bad, but it's something you want to pay attention to. So we'll go ahead and hit V so that we can view the contents of the file, and we see, okay, well, here's respond.bat. It used to say this is a different batch file. Now it says this is a batch file. No, maybe that's bad. We don't want to run that. So let's go ahead and run it again. We're going to get that same warning, and now we'll say, yes, we do. That's okay. We're okay with that change. Now it's going to go ahead and execute. You see it's detected a Windows 10 64-bit system, so that's how it's going to decide what tools to execute. It's going to tell us by default where our data is going to be written to. So by default, it's going to write to a folder on the root of the drive that you're running NAT from, and it's going to name it for the Windows host name. So that's the default. You can change it if you want. We'll go ahead and say no, we don't want to change it. And once we OK that, it's going to go out and start executing through our tools. So it's going to tell us each tool that it executes as it goes, and it automatically writes the output. There's a couple of, if you look at the user manual, there's a couple arguments that you can use in the CMD files that are special and are specific to NAT. One of them is the outdir command, and basically what that does, it's a variable that will specify the output directory when you actually execute the tool, right? Because this up here, obviously, H laptop is going to change every time you run the tool. So you can put that in as a variable in your command line arguments if you have a tool that, say, needs to know where John, it's piping the output to.
On the results files, does it also hash the results files?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, it does. So
I mean, that's important. And we don't talk about forensics enough on the show, but obviously when you're doing any type of investigation, whether that's for HR reasons, for law enforcement, or for some kind of security, malware-related type incident, that's important to maintain integrity across your tool set and your results to make sure they haven't been tampered with.
Right, exactly, and that's part of what makes some of these batch files that you have to run so cumbersome, right? Yeah. It's not that I have to have 50 lines of, hey, I want to run these 50 tools. It's, okay, I need to hash all of the tools that I'm using. I need to collect all of the output. I need to have lines in there to hash all the output of every single tool that I've run. And that's where it starts to get really cumbersome. And that's what part of what NAT is doing automatically for you, is taking care of the integrity of the tools, taking care of the integrity of the files. So we can see here it says it's completed successfully. Press any key to continue. So let's jump out real quick and just take a look at the output. So we'll jump over. We can see we've got that folder in the root of our drive. Now, the folder structure looks very similar. In this case, we just ran the OS and the process tools, so we're going to have the same output folders that are going to contain the output from those tools. We've got two other files here, and these are things that Nat wrote. The first is _nat.log, and that. Let me open that not in Notepad. Let me open it in the right Notepad here. This is a detailed log of all of the activity that Nat took. So it's date and time stamped, tells you what it detected, shows you what tools it ran, what their hash values were when you ran them, and we'll output any errors there as well for troubleshooting. The other one is md5.txt, and that's exactly what you were talking about here. This is a CSV file of the hash values of all of the output. So as soon as that output is written to disk, it's going to go ahead and hash those and record those hash values, so you have those as close to the time of creation as possible. And then obviously we have the output from all of our different tools. So here we have the output from PS list. We can go ahead and pop that open. And you can see Nat just up at the top appends the date and time it was started, and also what command it was run with. This is helpful if you are running the same tool with multiple commands. You'll know what output is associated with what. And then you just have the text output, or the whatever format the output is for each of the tools. So this is the output of PS list, and it's just a list of all of our processes. Now we can take all this back and actually start doing our forensics and our investigations on them.
And what is what was the other tool? TCP V?
Oh, TCP vcon. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What does
I
that
actually
look like?
because I changed it. Because we changed it to just run process and OS.
Oh, okay. You
it
didn't
run that, but
okay, that's fine.
we can actually.
I'm just curious because it was like 2003, 2004. I could have used this. Where were you in 2003 or 2004 when I was doing incident response and forensics for machines that have been compromised? I really needed something like this.
Yeah, no, this is one of those great sysinternals tools here, and you can see this is some of the output we're starting to get from TCP vcon. It's just network connections, things like that. It takes a little while to run, but it's a great tool. It's for grabbing those network artifacts. I think it's probably one of the better ones out there.
Awesome.
Very nice.
Questions for John? Anyone?
First of all, don't you just love what Mark Rozinovich does with the sysinternals tools? I mean, they're pretty cool.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
I don't have the questions. I'm just making editorial comment. That's it.
I'm making mental notes for tools to make sure I check out.
He's making mental notes to check out his tools.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah. There's a whole list, like I said, out. So if you go to dflabs.com/nat, there's a whole list of tools out there. And again, it's not required. You could run this with non-IR tools, I guess, if you really wanted to, and it would run just fine. But just tools that I've kind of come across over the years that I like to run in live response situations. Everything on there is free. The only thing I think that's not on there is there's a memory acquisition tool that is one of the better ones I've come across, and I want to say it's maybe a couple $100.
Gotcha.
But
That's
obviously there's free stuff out there for
no,
memory
John,
acquisition as well.
The NAT tool that you wrote, is that open sourced as well? Can people get the source code?
No, we haven't released the source code yet.
Okay.
No. I may have to clean that up a little bit. It was
Sure,
kind of
I gotcha.
a long homegrown project. So
yeah, I know. We all, believe
much.
me, we all get that when we talk about some utility or a tool that we wrote. And I was like, you should open source that. And you're like, yeah, like I have no problem open sourcing it, except my code is really friggin' ugly, or there's like comments that talk about llamas inappropriately or something.
Yep.
Right. Yeah.
See,
so
I do that, and then I put it on GitHub, and my intern rewrites it.
Yeah.
Does a pull request.
Yeah. That's nice. We all need Larry's intern to do that for us.
Yes.
Yeah.
I need one of those.
But no longer our intern. We actually hired her full time.
There you go. It worked out for her. That's awesome. And you folks as well. So, John, thank you very much for appearing on Security Weekly. DFLabs.com/nat to get the free tool that does everything that John described and more. I like that it's a framework and people can extend it, and I hope it's open sourced at some point as well, because I think that's important. And then you could take contributions, as Larry said, from other people.
Yeah, and
continue.
We've seen similar tools, but not nearly as polished. So awesome.
Good job.
Yeah, and happy to take comments in the meantime. I would like to open source it, but as people get in and play around with it, hit me up on Twitter. You can reach me through our website as well. So if you run into an issue or you have one of those, hey, wouldn't it be cool if kind of moments,
sure.
Just hit me up. I'd like to keep maintaining it. So let me know what your thoughts are, and we'll work it in.
Sounds good. Excellent. John, thank you so much. With that, we're going to take a short break. Come back. Talk about the security news for this week. Stay tuned.